Hey Desert Dwellers, this is Carl Forehand. This episode is a special episode with Megan, South Benninger, and Ruthie, and we just wanted to highlight what happened in the previous week when the idea that Tony Jones was platformed at the Theology Beer Camp, and then that came to a head inside the New Evangelicals Facebook community group. When it did, the New Evangelicals and Tim Whitaker had the chance to do something monumental and really make a mark for abuse victims, but they didn't. So you might think we're being a little mean to them in this, but I hold them culpable along with the other speakers that are speaking with Tony Jones. I think everybody out there just wants one person to stand up and say something. Want one person to stand up for the victims and not just say they're for the victims, but do something meaningful from a position of power. I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Desert Sanctuary with Carl and Laura Forehand.
Often when we have doubts about religion, or we want to be contemplative, or simply ask questions, it can feel like we are wandering out into the desert.
We would like to welcome you to our sanctuary, the Desert Sanctuary.
We've tried to pick guests that resonate with our fellow friends and seekers here in the desert.
Our hope is that you will find life for your body, soul, and spirit.
And now, here is our show.
Hi, welcome to the Desert Sanctuary. I'm Laura Forehand, off camera tonight, kind of just moderating, I guess, if you will, the podcast, but we're doing something special tonight here with Carl and a couple of wonderful guests. So I'm going to pass it off to you, Carl.
Thanks. Just real quickly, leaning forward is our new book, and it's out, and it's number 2 in new releases right now. I don't want to give a whole bunch of commercials about everything. We want to get into this talk real quickly, but the ebook is $2.99, so it's as cheap as we can mark it down. But we are at number 2 right now. In case you want to help with that, that'd be great. Otherwise, we're going to get into the conversation here, and makes me a little more nervous every time we're live. I'm not an actor, or I prefer to keep my head down and talk while I'm on the podcast, and so now I have to look up, but it makes it a little tougher. We're going to talk tonight about Tony Jones's appearance at the Theology Beer Camp. You may hear us at least me refer to it as the Theo Bros, and the New Evangelicals podcasting group that promoted that, and also kind of mishandled it, and we'll talk about that as we go through. But before I get started, I wanted to just talk about, there's a guy named Van Roo that did some research, or has kind of kept some research for this, and I was talking to him, and he said, really, I wasn't the closest to the situation, but the people that were the closest to the situation are still traumatized. And this originates from the area of 2009, and it erupted again in 2015. And so they're going to talk about, Megan will talk about that tonight. But the issue, I want to make clear our intention. This is not about who was right or who was wrong in a marital spat. It's not about this. It's not that Tony made some mistakes along the way, as he describes it. It's about him being platformed as a narcissistic, with narcissistic personality disorder, but also with his history of abuse. Not only has it been traumatizing, but it is being traumatizing to people now. And so we want to assert that New Evangelicals didn't handle this right. It's already caused lots of trauma among people in the way it was handled. And I personally see the speakers and people like the New Evangelicals as culpable in this issue. So we're going to talk about that tonight. Luckily, we have some guests because my breath is leaving me right now.
Oh, no.
We want to talk to Ruthie and also to Megan South Benninger. And I'll let them introduce themselves really quickly, and then we're going to go to Megan.
Hi, I'm Megan Benninger. I'm an abuse advocate. I've been through a lot of church abuse, a lot of abuse cover-ups in churches and schools personally, in my personal life. It's a little incredible how many. And then also professionally, my husband and I run BaptistAccountability.org, which is a database where we track Baptist abusers and their enablers. And because of being involved in that, I have read and listened to thousands of stories. And so when things like this come up, it's pretty clear to me that it follows the same pattern. I was part of the New Evangelicals, kind of hoped it wouldn't in this case, but it seems to have. So anyway, that's me.
Now, Ruthie, who are you?
I'm Ruthie Hurd. I have a background in a lot of, I also come from a lot of church abuse. I was raised in the church. I've been to a lot of different denominations and experienced probably the most abuse in a charismatic church setting that I ended up leaving/getting kicked out of. And also a domestic abuse survivor from my last relationship before I met my husband. So quite close to a lot of various abuse dynamics and have seen a lot of the bugs under the rock, so to speak.
Yeah. So Megan, we've become good friends over the last week or two, huh?
Yeah, I'd say. I mean, we were pretty good friends anyway, but
Yeah. You've been on the podcast, and it's very informative. I remember to this day when you shared. But tell us about the kind of recent stuff that blew up and kind of the history of this thing, in whatever way you want to tell it.
Sure. And I don't know, Carl, if maybe at some point under this you can share the link to the post on my page, but I have a public post where all this is spelled out and you can go on rabbit trails. There are links, there's documentation, even actual court documents saying that Tony abused his wife. This is what the court documents say. So it's really a severe situation. And so the event Theology Beer Camp, I am only aware of that because I belonged to the New Evangelicals Facebook group and I follow their podcast. And Theology Beer Camp is promoted on their podcast weekly. I mean, like as if it's the best thing that's ever happened, so I'm always like, oh, that sounds cool and want to listen to it afterwards, But this year, let's see, I was on Facebook and I saw a post by Ryan Stoller, who is another abuse advocate. Mm-hmm. And he apparently drew attention to this initially on August the 2nd on Twitter, that Tony Jones was going to be speaking at this event. And he tagged Pete Enns and some other people that were involved in his comments. Pete Enns then blocked Ryan. And Ryan did a post about that, kind of saying, why did I get blocked for asking questions? Mm-hmm. And this is where I came in. I saw that post and I was like, okay, that's disappointing. Mm-hmm. I had never even heard of Tony Jones. So I started researching and was like, what? Why would this person be speaking at Theology Beer Camp. I thought progressive spaces were a little more educated about these things. So I was really shocked that PDENS had done this blocking thing. I reshared this post with my disappointment on my personal Facebook page. And I also, in the comments, I tagged Tim Whitaker, who is the leader of the New Evangelicals, Tripp Fuller, who is the founder of the Theology Beer Camp, PDEN, since he was involved. I can't remember exactly everyone, but if you go to that post, you can see, and I link to that post in the summary post. So nobody said a word. It was crickets, which is typical. So the next day after that, I was like, this is really bothering me. And so I knew the New Evangelicals group. I'm like, oh, I'll post it in there. They know what Theology Beer Camp is. I thought, well, maybe people on my page don't even care, don't know what it is, but these people will know what it is. So I posted my post in there, and here was my exact comment. I shared Ryan Stahler's post about PDENS blocking him, and I said, this has me so disappointed today. Please let Tripp Fuller, PDENS, Timothy Whitaker et al. Know that you won't support them platforming a known abuser at Theology Beer Camp 23. Survivors spoke up en masse. People just really started having a big conversation. It was very respectful, really, but pretty energetic. People were upset.
I remember one of the things that the women were saying almost in unison and very loudly, would you please just listen to us? Several of them kept saying it over and over again, stop saying yeah, but, just listen to us, listen to the abuse victims, and especially to the women. Right. Yeah.
And that from the beginning wasn't really happening too much. Anyway, there was a lot of pushback. It does appear that Tim Whitaker had little prior knowledge of Tony Jones's past. Even though he and Tony both participated in beer camp last year, I had a private conversation with Tim, tried to help educate him about abuse and how this appearing, going to beer camp and accepting that this man is being platformed there, how that might look to the survivor community, how that would make them feel. I just really tried to get that across to him. I couldn't tell in the conversation really if I had gotten through, but he shortly after put out an 8-minute video response in the group saying that he had now extensively researched the situation.
In a day, right? In a day or a day?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, given he researched probably as much as I had at that point. Yeah. But there's so much information out there. But there are court documents. That's what gets me.
Yeah.
I don't know. So anyway, he said he had spoken to people involved in Tony's past, including 2 of Tony's own children who think their dad's, fine. And to him, that was proof that everything was okay. And I even told him, I'm like, I know my own stories. I know other people's abuse stories. That's just not how it works out. A lot of times children of abusive parents stay super close to those parents. Mm-hmm. So that's not proof of anything.
Right.
Anyway, and he basically said in this video that the facts are murky and he has a clear conscience attending beer camp. After the video was posted, it really hit the fan. People, survivors, a lot of people that weren't understanding before got, started reading up on it and were like, what's going on? And there was just a lot of dissension. Okay. And a lot of pushback, a lot of not listening to survivor emotions, how this makes them feel. It was very traumatic for a lot of people who felt that this was a safe space for them, that felt like this is, you people are supposed to understand this. Let's see here.
Right in the middle of that, one of the speakers, Josh Patterson, kind of ran roughshod. I mean, in my messenger, he was kind of all over me. And in your comments and in the Evangelicals, he also made a video, which he later,
even longer video.
Yeah, which he later pulled all that back, and realized he made a mistake. But I tried to talk to a couple of the speakers personally, and try to convince them to come out publicly and talk about it. But I kind of got the same thing from all of them that Tim did. They said, well, the kids are living with him now, and he won this little court case, which is a family court case, not a legal case, of criminality. And so it was a lot of things producing that anxiety, right?
And survivors were educating all of these people in the group about this. Like, we were saying, no, like, look at this. This isn't how it works out. In our very own experiences, we're telling you, and it was just like,
Mm-hmm.
So during that time also, as to what you said, Carl, Tripp Fuller, Thomas J. Ord, Josh Patterson, and Pete Enns all made statements in the group. Tripp Fuller made a fairly long statement defending Tony and saying how good of a friend he's been. That was a really annoying response to me. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, this is exactly what the evangelical church does. It's all about the good old boys. So Thomas Ord basically said he agreed with Tim and would be attending. As you already gave the summary of Josh Patterson, Pete Enns just said to message him privately for his thoughts. And I thank you, Carl, for pushing back on that. You spoke up and said, why don't you just post it here so we all can read the information at the same time? And then I pointed out, yes, many of us have been traumatized by asking for private communications with pastors, and we've, been spiritually abused, hammered over the head with Matthew 18, go one-on-one with your brother, all that stuff. He never responded to that. Yeah.
I just wanted to quickly interject a little bit with my own experience as far as like personally talking to, like being personally talked to by a male pastor, like a pastor figure or like a male figure in authority. When I was at the spiritually abusive church that I attended for a while, I was 18 years old, and I was looking at a passage that was up on the screen that they were preaching, that he was preaching from, and I was not getting the same interpretation as he was doing. And I noticed he wasn't reading the full passage. He was just reading like half the verse. Mm-hmm. And so I was like grabbing my parents had taught me how to use an interlinear as a kid. And so I had two translations of a Bible open, and I was like cross-referencing verses in two different translations. Yeah. And I was going, that's not what that says. He's skipping half the verse. Mm-hmm. And that's not my interpretation of that verse. And anyway, long story short, this pastor noticed, and he walked up to me after the service, followed by the entire elder board, who were all males. And they surrounded me, this little 18-year-old girl, and started going like, why were you reading your Bible during the service? Which already was a weird thing to say, because
it's a weird thing to say because
it's church and you read your Bible at church. And anyway, so he, I started stammering out, and then he was like, well, what did you see in that verse? And I said, well, and I started stammering, and I said something like, I think I got a slightly different revelation than you did. And then I started stammering out because, again, I was being surrounded by a group of men. Uh-huh. And having already been a sexual abuse survivor, I'm going, I do not feel safe. I am surrounded by men. I'm 18. I'm still basically a little girl. Mm-hmm. And I started stammering and getting scared, and he just like leaned into me and said, well, let me tell you what I see in you. And then he started like saying all of these things, like, you are, trying to sow division. You are trying to do this. You are that. You have a spirit of this. And like, eventually I managed to get away from him and ran out crying because he was telling me what I was doing. And in my head, it really messed with my head, because it was like, I know who I am. But in that moment, I didn't know who I was. Because all these men are trying to tell me who I am and what my motives are. When all I was trying to do was go, I don't understand that verse, and I don't like what you're saying about it.
Well, Ruthie, you should have gone home and asked your husband to explain it.
I didn't have when I was 18.
That's right. I'm sorry. Your father, who was your headship until marriage. Sorry, I just had to.
It's all good. No, yeah, that's probably what they would have said, right?
Yeah.
But because my husband and our father weren't there, he was considered my head.
Right.
So
I have a feeling a lot of women are going to relate to your story.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, like that's very much like a feeling that I got from why I don't want to talk to men privately in private messages, because
absolutely
I don't have any defense. And that is the thing, that they will just run roughshod over you, and they don't give you a chance to get to have an advocate. And I mean, even if you're in court, you have an advocate, you have a lawyer to speak for you,
right?
So like the private message for me feels like I don't want to re-victimize myself, and I want to have that boundary where I don't want to talk to you if you're going to talk to me privately, because how am I supposed to prove that you're bullying me?
And you know what? In my first post on my page, I had written initially, because I had said, what's up with this, guys? And I tagged all these men, and I'd said, if anyone's willing to talk. But then I came back shortly after. I'm like, I rescind that offer. I'm not talking to anyone privately, because I know how this goes, and I will be spiritually abused. And I literally cannot take it, because I've been through so much of it. And I said, only public. Tim did approach me then at the one point and asked, if I would be willing. He said, I know you said you wouldn't, but I just wanted to give you the opportunity. I said, the concession that I would make is I would do it if he agreed to have it recorded, because of that very reason, because unfortunately, record everything, keep things in writing, no private and I would say the opposite of Matthew 18. If you're a woman, never have a private conversation with a church leader, because it just is gaslighting and horrific abuse, and then you can't prove any of it.
Right.
Yeah.
I was going to say there's so just for background, the beer conference, 15 men and 7 women. So 68% men. But the other stat is that there's 18 white people and 4 non-white people. So it's 82% white, which what I understand tends to be the way festivals and conferences go generally. But that's kind of part of the issue, because a lot of the speakers, their defense was, hey, we've got a really diverse group of speakers. And I don't know what that has to do with anything. One of them is an accused abuser, well known. It's going to traumatize people. That's the issue. And I couldn't make any headway with any of them on, well, I'm going to do it. I've talked to Tony. The main thing they would say is, well, I've talked to Tony. I'm like,
you have clearly never researched abuse and how people manipulate and deceive, because this is how it is. Yeah. They're always the best person. They're always the pillar of the community. Like, they make everyone love them. They're charming. They even deceive the courts. I mean, they're really good at what they do.
Sure.
I have yet to see an abuser who goes, oh yeah, sorry, that was me. I did that. My bad.
Yeah.
You should not have me at your thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I should just not come and speak, because I'm a horrible, abusive person. I have yet to see anyone.
And that's
who's actually
amazing.
abusive say that.
Throughout this, like that occurred to me too. It's like, really, if Tony really had an ounce of integrity, he would have stepped down by now, knowing that he's causing this much uproar. But no, they love it. They love this.
They've done it all along.
Yeah.
So, can you give us a little bit of maybe the further back history, Megan?
Yeah. I'm sorry. What in particular about Tony?
Let me just start, and you break down whenever you need to fix what I'm saying, because it's,
yeah. No, that's fine.
in the 90s, Rob Bell gave a sermon about the emergent church. And so after he gave this sermon, he and Mark Driscoll both started churches called Mars Hill, kind of based on this idea of Paul's sermon. And so Tony Jones was right there at that time, and Tony Jones kind of became the de facto leader of the emergent church. And he was very, I would describe him as Mark Driscoll-like, very abrasive and, doing things to get attention and so on, like that. And he was the default leader. But then in 2009 is when supposedly his affair happened. And also when a police report confirms that he shoved his wife and dislocated her shoulder. But there's also many, many reports, especially from her, that he was sort of terrorizing her, making phone calls, not answering, saying, "This is urgent, call me back," and then not answering for many times. Eventually, she got in the divorce, she got control of the children, or she had custody of the children. But then my understanding is that he kept suing her and issuing motions and things until she couldn't afford to do it anymore. So with the assault and with custody of the children, she finally gave up on both issues. Then in 2015, David Hayward, the naked pastor, who's a friend of mine, took issue with one of Tony's blogs, because Tony basically said of Mark Driscoll, the only thing wrong with Mark Driscoll is his theology. And Mark Driscoll, as you know, is a guy who, left a path of destruction for many years, all over the country. And when David Hayward brought it up, there was 1,200 comments, and he just left it up and wouldn't take it down. And they tried to put pressure on him. That's when the campaign against Tony's wife was that she's batshit crazy, right? Just became a battle royale, of his friends, basically against her.
Yeah, I just wanted to interject real quick. Interesting. He should have a problem with Mark Driscoll's theology. How about his own theology when he was having the affair with this woman that he ended up leaving his wife for? Apparently, he referred to her and built a whole theology that she was his spirit wife. And there are witnesses that have attested to this. Like, he was openly having an affair and having this theology, to my understanding. That's what it sure sounds like. And I'm like, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. And we're not even like picking on his theology. Like, there are so many problems.
Yeah.
So many problems. Yeah.
What I understand so he was officially by a clinician diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. She was not ever diagnosed with a mental illness other than stress, and somewhat understandable. It should have been worse, but.
And I know people like to say, that we don't want to stigmatize mental illness. And that is a consideration in this because, people can get help. People have gotten help and improved. But if you do any research on narcissistic personality disorder, I recommend Dr. Romani on YouTube. She does short videos about narcissism that are excellent and kind of goes into the pathology of it all and like the tactics that they use and the underlying psychological issues. It's really interesting. I don't know what to say about that, but I do think we have to take it into consideration. I mean, because the very nature of that personality disorder is to gain power over people. Like that's the whole, and you know, it almost always leads to abuse. I don't want to say always, nothing's always, but they go hand in hand, for sure.
So could you talk a little bit about platforming? There's this idea of platforming. Been going on since Constantine, put somebody up on a stage, right? And what that does, and maybe talk about the bite model a little bit or something, you know, those some of those things.
Sure.
That do to people.
I think I just want to point out what has seemed to me to be profound hypocrisy for the new evangelicals. There, just one small example I came across. If you go to their Instagram page and they have their stories and you can scroll through the stories. If you get to, there's one called J Mac for John MacArthur, and it has a thumbs down emoji. It's the only one that has a thumbs down emoji, so it really stands out. And I don't have time to read all of them, but this is where he was calling out John MacArthur for very similar things, and saying kind of what the purpose of the new evangelicals was and how they don't believe in giving platform to abusers. And they were calling other churches out on giving platforms.
So this Tim or Tony?
I'm sorry, this is Tim Whitaker.
Okay.
Is calling out other churches who are platforming abusers.
Okay.
So to me, the hypocrisy is just, I can't wrap my head around it.
Yeah.
Here's one
Applies
quote.
to everybody else. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think most people that were in the group, a lot of people felt the same way. Like, what? I thought this was the whole purpose of this group. So I'm just going to read a few quotes from that story. We exist primarily for the bodies behind the bus of the American Evangelical Church. We are not here to be moderate or to coddle perspectives that refuse to take abuse seriously. If our content is too extreme for you, if it's too social justice minded, if we talk about oppression or racism or homophobia too much, if you think we're too negative about the American Evangelical Church, then we encourage you to unfollow us. And we mean that in the most kind way. So that's one. I'm just going to go on to some others. I will also say that as far as myself, Tim is concerned, I don't care if we have 100 followers or 1 million followers. We are here to push the church forward. The way we do that is by holding space for the marginalized, oppressed, and abused people who were once in the evangelical machine and then got tossed to the side when they became a problem. We create spaces via Zoom, in-person, Facebook, IG stories, and by also speaking up when example after example of prominent evangelical leaders abusing people comes to light. Another one, and again, there's like a whole bunch of screens, and I'm only reading a few. Now he's talking about John MacArthur here. Will John be held accountable from his followers and supporters? Don't hold your breath. We've seen and covered stories like this time and again. Remember when we asked Gateway Church why they were platforming notorious abuser Mark Driscoll at a pastor's conference? What was the response? Silence. We even wrote them a letter, emailed it to them, and the response we got was, "Thanks for your concern." So here he was doing what we're doing now. It's just, you don't see it when it's yourself. Finally, I want to speak to the silent majority, the pastors who won't say anything, the pastors and leaders of evangelical church and culture who would say to me, yeah, this was wrong, but won't take a public stand rebuking John, Al Mohler, and the elders for the evil they committed. You are part of the problem.
Yeah.
So I feel like I read those words and I'm like, what's happening?
Yeah.
How do you say that and then have no problem with this issue and silence was to me, okay, so the part that goes next was even worse than the platforming. The platforming itself is a problem because that's how abuse gets perpetuated. More people get traumatized. This person just keeps going because no one will, stop them and just keep giving them things to do. But after all of that, and this seems to be typical in all cases like this, then there is the silencing of people and the spiritual abuse of the people who are trying to hold them accountable. And I did want to read here from the BITE model that you brought up. This is Stephen Hassan, who's a world-renowned cult expert. He has a BITE model that you can find online, BITE, and the I in BITE is for information control, which I think applies here. Part of this would be deception, which includes deliberately withholding information or distorting information to make it more acceptable. There's a bunch of things listed under here. I'm just reading ones that I think applied here. Compartmentalize information into an outsider versus insider. Control information at different levels and missions within the group. Allow only leadership to decide who needs to know what and when. And in this case, as you will see, some things I'm going to go through, abuse victims were kicked out of the group, had posts, comments deleted. At one point, and I know we didn't go through this, the group was paused at various times. At one point, it was paused for I think 5 days. It was a long period of time. And during that, they just went through and just deleted anything having to do with, what they didn't want on there. And people saw this happen. I do have some testimonials I'd like to read if we get time later. And I just also want here to read a Wade Mullen quote. Wade Mullen is a church abuse expert. He has written a book. I do not have the title in front of me, but it's something like "There's Something Not Right Here" or something like that. Maybe someone can find that. But this quote, I don't think is from the book, but it is one of his quotes. An organization or culture that perpetuates abuse will question the motives of those who ask questions, make the discussion of problems the problem, condemn those who condemn, silence those who break silence, and descend upon those who dissent. And I thought that was powerful. I feel like that's what happened here.
The book is called Something's Not Right.
Thank you.
I just found that too.
You found it too. Thanks, guys. I'm really bad at multitasking, so I appreciate that.
Got a lot of information.
Yeah, I have 17 pages of notes. So I've never prepared for anything so much in my life, I don't think, as this podcast. Usually I just wing it, but this one, there's just too much it's really egregious to me.
I feel like as the generation I'm part of, we just kind of live with our phone next to us where we go, where's that thing? And then we just grab our phone and Google things.
Yep.
It's just part of our everyday life.
I can do it. I just can't do it while I'm talking or doing something else. So Carl, I don't know if this would be a good time to maybe read one or two of the quotes.
Yeah, I was going to read just a couple from the comments here on the live.
Oh, go ahead.
And then you can go with that. So Aaron said the video was devastating. My impression when I was talking to Tim was he was, he's trying to get through this as fast as he could so that he can make a statement or whatever. Then he made the video. And so Aaron says that video was devastating. And for many of the reasons you just laid out so well. says a different Aaron says a very defensive stance from many of the people involved, defense with zero empathy or desire to understand. Lack of empathy is one of the characteristics of NPD, by the way. Let me see, 100% from the Evangelical Playbook from Daniel Griffin. Oops, I wasn't going to say last names. They're on the live anyhow. Okay. The response from all of them was incredibly dismissive and self-serving. Yes, it felt like exactly the same response that many of us had received in post-evangelical experiences. So much labor, so much it was intimidation as a tactic, some empathy for Ruthie from Aaron there. This is so crazy from Jessica. This is so crazy, Ruthie. These pastors were so afraid of you and the knowledge you were chasing. So there's some more comments. We can read some more of them later. But you have a lot of comments from, that many of them probably deleted and things like that. Do you want to share some of that?
Yeah, I thought maybe I'll read a few here and then I'll give Ruthie the floor. And then if we have any time after that, maybe I can get in and read some more of these, because to me, I feel like the important thing here is to give our energy to the people who were silenced and let their voices be heard. So this one is from Shannon Johnson. She said, Tim's 8-minute long video has now been deleted. Josh Patterson's 12-minute long video has now been deleted. Josh's very volatile comments have been deleted. Hundreds of comments from abuse survivors calling out Tim, Pete, Tripp, Josh, and the New Evangelicals board for accountability have all been deleted, none of which used dehumanizing language like the board claims. I was witness to every single now deleted post and read every single now deleted comment. The board's statement gave no closure or resolution to abuse survivors and perpetuated their silencing. Some of the board's statement is not only inaccurate, but blatantly false. I thought that was a really powerful statement. She also, for time's sake, I won't read this unless we have time at the end, but she had an amazingly brilliant letter. I say letter. She wrote it. She wanted to post it as her farewell post, but they stopped accepting posts without whatever. They had to filter it and accept it. And so she posted it as a comment to get around that. Her comment saying, I think this is wrong. I'm leaving the group. She was immediately removed and her comment deleted, which she knew would happen, but there it was. It just kept happening. Now, this is from Darcy Hossack. When Tim issued his 8-minute video saying his conscience was completely clear, I sat in numb disbelief for a moment, then commented, after someone else saying, "Thank you, we love you, Tim," that the video absolved him of nothing. I commented multiple times, along with so many others, and then the group was suspended. When it was live again and clearly nothing had changed, I resumed calling on Tim to do better, be better, listen to the voices of survivors, which were all being dismissed, unless they were men, in favor of a narrative that the TNE leaders knew better, must know something we didn't, should be trusted. Exactly like in the churches I'd left, word for word. And I agree with that. And that's not her whole, again, I'm cutting these down for time, but at the end of her statement, she told a little bit of her survivor story. She was a survivor, and she says, I was never believed or had the threats to my safety or life taken seriously. So to have thought I'd found a place where I could unpack these things seemed like an unexpected bit of grace, but it wasn't. TNE, Tim and his apologists, is just another hill they're willing to let survivors die on, except that 100 or so of us won't die. I loved that. I'm like, you're right. We are not going to be silenced and we are not going to shut up. That's right. This one's from Jessica Mercier. This will be the last one I'll read for now. I feel silenced and hurt that several of my kind and fair comments have been deleted in the New Evangelicals Facebook group. It's been frustrating to see how they've handled the situation. It feels toxic and unsafe, and an unsafe place as a woman. 2 years ago, I was so glad to find a place to feel heard where I could process, but that's been taken away from me now. So I have a bunch more here, but I want Ruthie definitely to get time to tell her story. If we have any time at the end, I'll read some more. Otherwise, I might even do a video afterwards or something and post that with the comments so people can listen. Oh, Carl, I think you're muted there.
Yeah, we still have lots of time, so do what you need to do.
Okay.
We're here for you.
So as far as my story goes, I'll concisely explain how I ended up in TNE. It's a very short story, essentially. I had a friend of mine who I used to go to youth group with from years ago, and I think I kind of started, I don't know, I started questioning / I guess you could call it deconstructing a long time before a lot of my other friends. So when they started deconstructing, they all started like coming and talking to me and stuff and you know, sharing things with me and stuff. And this particular friend had just left or was in the process of leaving his church. And so he said, hey, I know you're really looking into these different spheres of, you know, progressive Christianity or deconstruction or what have you. This is a really cool group that you might want to join. So I did, and it was very cathartic for a while. Just, you know, being able to read other survivor stories and other people who are actually like willing to take the box apart and look at all the aspects and stuff. And so that was how I came about to be in TNE. So I actually didn't know. I'm not on Instagram or Twitter or anything. I just have Facebook. Yeah. And so I didn't actually even know who Tim was. I didn't know who any of those people were when I joined. So I basically was just in the Facebook space and just in that group. And so for me, that was my one avenue. And so about my history, as far as just being able to speak to what happened in TNE, I just really noticed the aspect of just like the isolation and shaming by a lot of the moderators and by Tim, where it was like, you cannot talk about this. It just really, it triggered me. It devastated me and triggered me like deep down. I had a very visceral reaction to it because I had experienced that. I had experienced what it was like to have these men isolate me and talk bad about me and yell these horrible things at me. And so for me, it was like not being able to speak about something that happened to me once again. When I tried to leave the abusive church that I had attended, I tried to have a meeting with the pastor at the time, just like a final reconciliation sort of thing, trying to explain why I needed to leave. And he basically told me, well, if you leave, you're going out from under your head and God will remove his hand of blessing from you. And something in me,
I've heard that. Sorry.
And something in me snapped. And I spun around and I looked at him and I said, you're not my head. God is. I'm not walking away from God. I'm walking away from you.
Yeah.
And I spun around and walked out. And it was just, and after I left, I nearly collapsed on the pavement, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just said that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Like, it's like you're going to strike me now.
Right.
But
I love that you did that.
There's a lot of gaslighting. I mean, whether it was in, you know, private conversations or in the Facebook group or in a pastor and you're meeting with yourself, there's a lot of gaslighting of you must be crazy to think that way.
Mhm.
And it's so devastating, so hurting. And
Yeah. Oh, sorry. You can continue if you need.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, and then another aspect of that happened later where I was in an abusive relationship for a while. I got involved with a guy from my young adult group at church, and different church now. I was 20, and he was very abusive, and he ended up being very sexually abusive. And it wasn't until I realized much after the fact, after friends talked to me and stuff, that when I thought I had agreed, but he like pressured me into it. And I didn't understand consent at the time. I didn't understand that I could say no. And then after we did it the first time, because of purity culture, which, don't even get me started on that. But because of purity culture, I thought I had to stay with him. I thought, well, now you've done it. You've slept with him. You need to stay with him. No one else is going to want to be with you.
Chewed up piece of gum.
Yeah, exactly. The rose has been crushed. All the petals have fallen off. You're
right. It can't be undone.
Yeah.
You're ruined. Yeah.
You poor little lonely flower stem,
Yeah.
Anyways, so I didn't think I could leave him. And then when I finally left him, it took me a couple times to finally leave him, because when I tried to move out, nobody would help me move. And I needed to move into a different home. And he was like, he was the only one who was this boyfriend that I was trying to leave, was the only one who was willing to help me move. Mm-hmm. And so when he did, he basically got me to, I'm not going to go into details because I don't want to be triggering, but basically he got me into the back of the trailer and assaulted me. So, yeah. But anyway, what ended up happening is I was able to leave him again after that, because some friends let me come visit for a month, and I just wouldn't return his calls and stuff like that. I was able to finally leave him after that point. And when I tried to leave him when I left him that second time successfully, I tried to reach out to my friends from church for help, and basically said, hey, I basically tried to do the same thing there, where I tried to blow the whistle on him and was like, hey, this guy is abusive. And I didn't even tell them about being assaulted that last time, because I thought, I don't want to even go there. I'm not ready to talk about it, but all of these other controlling aspects he has should be enough. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I guess he had either, when I was vulnerable with this one friend and told them a bit of what had actually happened, and his response was, well, if you didn't want, if he was so abusive, then why did you get naked with him in the first place? And
yeah.
So that was very much like, now it's, going into TNE and seeing this happen in front of my eyes, where they were just excusing everything that he was doing. And pointing at Julie as the crazy person. It's very much, I'm like, oh gosh, I know this play. Everyone was pointing at me and going, well, you agreed to sleep with him, so, he couldn't have been that bad. Or, you're just feeling guilty now because you slept with him and you shouldn't have. Yeah. And like, no empathy, no compassion on that level and I think it was because, like, for them, they didn't want to think about this person that they had thought was so nice and so wonderful and whatever, could do that. It was easier to think that I had lied.
It kind of boils down to that none of them want to have to confront him or speak up about it, or, have any kind of discomfort at all about it. In fact, in Christianity, a lot of times what I saw as a pastor for 20 years was that anytime we became uncomfortable, when someone told us about something that was tough, we got anxious and we started bypassing and giving platitudes, and we want to we didn't want to do the hard work of working through some of these things. And in my opinion, I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, go ahead.
In my opinion, that's what Tim did to a lot of people
Yes.
the other day. I'm uncomfortable, and his board even rebuked him for responding so quickly, but he just didn't want to feel the discomfort anymore. He didn't want to really have to deal with standing up to Tony or Tripp or anybody like that, because they've included his podcast in the, in the whatever they call them at the beer camp. So anyway, I'm sorry for interrupting.
No,
you.
yeah, that's fine. So anyway, tying that to what happened with me personally with TNE when all of this blew up, I was in there trying to help as well, just try to help uplift voices, trying to make sure that women got heard, because for me, I knew what it felt like when I wasn't heard. And being as my last name is Heard, I love that. Yeah. Spelled differently, but
Be heard.
Yeah, I want to be heard because I am a herd and I deserve to be heard.
Hey, my maiden name is South, and my nickname as a kid was Mouth of the South. I want to be heard too.
There you go. I love it. Anyway, so I was, trying to help uplift, and I was trying to, and there were a lot of different comments going on that were just really, there was some ableist conversations going on, and there were some threads where a Jewish person was talking about someone that they followed who had some very anti-Semitic views, and there were people jumping in there trying to defend why it wasn't anti-Semitic. And so at one point I finally spoke up and said, "Are you Jewish? No? Then sit down."
Yeah. Good.
And that was all I said, was basically, a Jewish person said that this was hurtful. You need to listen to that. Sit down.
Yeah.
And I got a warning for that. And then I got another warning for a comment on a thread that was being ableist, where they weren't listening to a not able-bodied person. And so I got some warnings, and then I got contacted as a result of having had the 2 warnings. I got 2 warnings and then was booted 5 seconds later. And when I got booted, like blocked from the group completely, a moderator reached out to me to tell me, "Hey, you've been, booted from the group, and you should have received information as to why." But Facebook was glitching, or something was going on, and there was when I clicked on the warnings that were supposed to give feedback, it was blank. Yeah. So I was booted unceremoniously and had no real reason given as to why. Mm. So I did try to say to him, "Hey, I got the warnings, but I don't know what they said." Mm. And it was a male moderator who reached out, who responded to me, and he explained to me the reasons why I was booted. And I was immediately triggered because of my history with having been, cornered by men.
Yeah.
Cornered by men on my own. And so for me, that was extremely triggering. So I responded back with a response. And I basically also said to him, like, "Hey, if you want to talk further, could you please have a woman contact me?" Mm. I said to him as well, like, "Hey, in the future, you may want to discuss with the board having women talk to women and men talk to men, because I know I'm not the only one who has history with this." Mm. And so at the very end of the letter, I said, "Hey, if you want to have further discussion with me, if the board wants to talk to me more, if the moderators want to talk to me more, I won't be talking to any men. I need a woman to talk to me." Mm-hmm.
Good.
And yeah. And he responded back a few hours later, and it was him still talking to me. And he laid into me about, "How dare you say you want to be," like, he didn't say "how dare you," but like that was the tone
Mhm.
You know, I don't want to read out the message because it was a private message, so I don't want to get in trouble for that. But essentially, his tone was very much like, well, if you're if you claim to be for survivors, why are you re-traumatizing people?
Yes, I read that.
Yeah, and he was saying to me, like, it was like he was standing there, like, shaking his finger in my face, going, like, you're the one re-traumatizing people. You're the one doing this. You're the one stirring up trouble, you know, and it very much felt like I was, like, my body put me into a fight or flight stance, basically, where I was like, I'm not the one doing it. I'm not the one doing it. And I kept repeating that in my head, like, I'm not the one re-traumatizing. I'm the one saying, stop traumatizing us.
Yeah.
And yeah.
That's very typical. Just want to add right here. There's a technique that is related with all of the narcissism studies and things. It's called DARVO, which is deflect, attack, reverse the order of victim and offender. So meaning the person tries to make themselves out to be the victim and you're the one that's, hurting people.
Right.
And I mean, I think it's a human response. I don't want to say like anybody who ever does this is a narcissist, because I think we all have done it, but I think it's important to start to see these patterns and how we can do better. We need to not respond to people that way.
I got the same kind of response when I gave my goodbye message, because apparently they had said we're taking a break for the evening to recover from this, and I didn't see that, or I didn't see it as mattering. I was just saying goodbye and saying why, and then the moderator came in and attacked me. Like why are you trying to prevent us from having our mental health? We need to recover. And I'm like, I'm just leaving my comment. I'm just out of here. I'm leaving my comment. You can read it whenever you want. Megan, whatever you're getting ready to say, but also can we read some more of those? Because the question, here's the question. So the question is kind of, I'm hearing from the speakers is, so what do you want from us? Right. And I think the people that wrote notes and screenshotted their comments and so on, I think they could probably tell us that. But whatever you want to share with us, can you share that?
Sure. And I just want to check, Ruthie, do you feel like done with your part? Like, do you have more to say? Because I'm fine with you saying more too.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was the main thing I wanted to share, just very much how like similar the situations were, and just very like, and how it affected me personally. Like I was a complete wreck when that happened. When he brought that up, and it very much was like, okay, I wasn't feeling, I was thinking to myself, when I first heard about the Tony Jones situation, I was not feeling PTSD. I was going, oh, good, we're talking about this. We're dealing with this. I was feeling empathy. I wasn't feeling PTSD symptoms. Reading other people's stories, I was not triggered personally.
It was. I wasn't well in the beginning.
Yeah, like I wasn't triggered personally until it became personal. I wasn't triggered personally until I had a man coming after me going like, you're a terrible person for doing this. And, it's all your fault that this is happening.
Yeah.
And I just really wanted to make that clear that, and kind of give a voice to other people who had been banned because, unblocked, because by taking away our ability to speak and process, they're causing a lot more harm and a lot more trauma and a lot more PTSD than just sharing our stories would have.
Yeah, because there's allowing people to talk. Yeah.
There's power in sharing our stories.
Right.
There's power in going, oh my gosh, me too.
Yeah.
Like that's where the Me Too movement comes from, because there's other women going, me too. Finally, someone's talking. Me too, me too, me too.
Laura and I consider those stories sacred. when we get to hear stories on our podcast, that they're sacred. Yeah. We count it a privilege to get to hear them. Certainly we wouldn't, on our podcast, if someone shared a story, we wouldn't attack them back.
Exactly.
What are you trying to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's basically what I wanted to share.
Thank you for sharing that. We appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for giving me a platform to do that. I appreciate, really, has been great. Appreciate that.
Ruthie, thank you for sharing that, because as a survivor myself, I know how much energy and heart it takes to share your story, and that you'll probably, if you're anything like me, you'll be down and out for a couple days after doing that, because it takes so much. And I know that you're doing it out of empathy and care for other survivors, and knowing that your voice will make a difference. So I really appreciate that you shared all that.
Thank you.
Good.
And Carl, I wanted to add, when you were saying about it, we were talking about it being reversed and you're made into the bad guy. That kind of happened to me in the beginning too. And I called it out immediately, because I knew it has been done to me so many times. They started framing it that this was all such an unfortunate mess because this, how did they word it? Grenade. This grenade was dropped in the group. As if, this was I attacked them, is how it came across. Everyone was like, oh my gosh, it's the person speaking out, calling attention to the problem that's the problem, not the actual problem, So I did call that out immediately, because I just knew at this point. But it's just interesting. I think that's something people need to learn to spot and call out and be like, wait a minute, I'm not the problem. let's go back to you. This is the actual problem. Don't put this on me, and be able to say that.
Yeah.
So I want to read from Allie Mast is our next person. And Allie says, I wasn't booted out, but I tried to submit this post on Friday when they reopened Facebook group, and it was denied without any reason given. It did not violate any group rules to my knowledge. Okay, so here is what she tried to post. People are still hurt and upset. I won't name the situation because you asked us not to, but silencing people, especially victims of abuse, feels so icky and so similar, because it's the same, as the religious abuse and trauma many of us have experienced. Why are you not allowing people to be upset with Tim, TNE, the whole situation on here? People are allowed to be angry at any other situation of silencing in the church world, but not this. Oh, that was an excellent statement. Mm-hmm. And again, this post wasn't approved. So that was, she screenshot her own post. Another member, this member prefers to stay anonymous, commented under a post. Maybe you guys remember a couple days, a week ago, I don't know now, came out a news story about Brian Houston, Hillsong Church founder, cleared of concealing his father's abuse. And so someone had posted this news story in the group, and people were commenting under it. And this person commented, and this is a very ironic post, and I'll explain why if you don't get it at first. This person says, well, I mean, if that's what the courts decide, I guess we have to go with it. So this is ironic because Tim Whitaker seemed to dismiss the court evidence surrounding Tony Jones's abuse in favor of information that he received privately and thought was more convincing. Her comment was deleted because she might be referring to the Tony Jones situation indirectly. So basically, this might be pointing out our hypocrisy. So let's delete it. It's just so many of these comments. This one is a bit.
Is that, that's part of the issue, right? Is that white men are going, you know what? I know more than you. I have more contacts than you.
Yeah.
I have access to more inside information than you do. And so let me just lay this out for you, and I'll tell you how to think. Right. And that's part of the big issue, right?
I don't know if you guys have heard the Lady Gaga song Till It Happens to You. Sometimes I just want to like grab a pair of headphones and jam it on guys' heads and like turn it up full blast and go, you don't know. I don't want to hear a thing from you until you've gone through it.
It's so true. Like, until you've gone through something, you truly can't know. And you do need to listen to the people who have gone through it. They are the experts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you could have a doctorate on a topic and you don't have as much knowledge about it as a person who lived it.
Mm.
Yeah.
True.
So yeah, I think you need to
More?
listen. Yeah. Go ahead.
You have more?
Yeah.
I ask if you have more.
I
Yes.
didn't mean to
So-
cut you off, but
Yeah. There's, I think this might be two more that are fairly long here, but
okay. That's
this member wants to remain anonymous, but she shared her email to the TNE mods with me. It was very long, so I cut it into sections. The most relevant here, I think I have the beginning and the end mostly. She says, my first issue is regarding a post I submitted. There's a rule about keeping posts relevant. I tried to post something about the signs of spiritual abuse and was declined because my post isn't relevant. Again, I think they thought it applied to them. The next day, I see a mod has posted 2 separate posts regarding food and restaurants. When I commented on the post asking how this wouldn't be considered a violation of keeping the post relevant rule, my comment was removed, and I was told I was commenting with bad intent. There was no bad intent on my part. I was genuinely confused about how spiritual abuse wasn't relevant, but overrated restaurants are. My second issue is the rule about dirty deleting. Does this rule also apply to mods? I've had and seen other comments deleted that were not in violation of group rules. My next overall issue regards seemingly unwritten rules about good or bad intent and good or bad faith. Now, I cut out some here because at this point, she went on to spell out several very detailed instances where she was reprimanded because the mods considered her to have bad intent. So then she wrapped her email up with the following. My main question is exactly how are positive intent and bad faith determined? I've never had a mod reach out with clarifying questions before I'm given a warning. The mods do not know me, my heart, or my thoughts when posting. So what criteria is being used to determine this? This member then received what seemed to be an automated response, but never received an official response from anyone. And then lastly here, we have Diane, I believe this is last, Diane Zeiss. And I believe I had to chop hers a little bit too here. So she said, my only goals in engaging in the conversations around this situation was to elevate domestic violence survivor voices and to offer a different perspective to those who didn't see a problem with attending beer camp. As a CSA and SA survivor myself, this entire experience has been exhausting and re-traumatizing. But at the time, I truly believed it would be worth it because I thought our community's goals were aligned. I had really taken to heart the words Tim said often, words that up until last Tuesday were pinned on TNE's Twitter page. Quote, our org prioritizes the voices of those marginalized by the evangelical church. On Twitter, we call out and respond to pastors and pundits who promote systems that prioritize their power at the expense of our community. And now that has been changed or taken down, apparently. Diane, I know, had communicated pretty extensively with Tim Whitaker through voice messages after things started heating up in the group. She also continued to participate in the group as usual. Under one post asking group members why they left the church, Diane commented, and actually, I'm going to give a little background to her comment before I give it. TNE has a tagline that they also say. They have a lot of little catchphrases, and one of them is, quote, exploring the house of the Christian tradition beyond the basement of evangelical fundamentalism. And Tim often gives this example that, evangelicalism is the basement of Christianity, but there's this whole big house above that we haven't even explored. Okay, so that's relevant background here to Diane's comment. Diane says, she says, this is under a post where group members were asked why they left the church. Someone just posted, why'd you guys leave the church? She said under that, yeah, just because there are stairs doesn't mean it's not the basement. Well, that apparently ticked off the mods.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to add that I actually had responded to her before her comment was deleted. I had actually responded to her comment underneath it and said, especially if the basement door gets slammed in your face.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was, yeah. But I guess when they took her comment down, that automatically took your comment.
I think that's probably the only reason I didn't get my first warning then, because I can be a little bit of a smart aleck when I want to.
I think women need to be. I think, we have to stand up for ourselves. So I thought that was both of those are excellent comments. And Diane had other comments that were blunt, but she says that she took care. This is her exact quote. She took care to avoid using words that someone might deem unkind or ill-intended. So she really, and I think we were there, she was very kind.
She's a sweetheart.
Yeah. And at no point did I really feel anyone was mean or unkind or calling names or doing anything like that. That's why it's just astounding to me. It's just literally shutting down the conversation. Mm-hmm. So later then, a moderator had a post asking about overrated restaurants. And Diane answered the question with the name of, it legitimately was the name of a restaurant in her town that she felt was overrated. And it's called The Basement Club. So this apparently was the last straw for TNE. The mods. The post was removed within minutes, and Diane was issued her first official warning. A bit later, she posted a gentle comment under another unrelated post, and I think you referred to this one, Ruthie, about disability.
Yes.
Pointing out that the poster, and I read this one, I think I was still there or something, but it was so gentle. She said, pointing out that the poster may have inadvertently be making ableist comments. Diane was almost immediately removed from the group and given the reason that she had broken the group rules 3 times. Never mind that she had only been notified of 2 violations, and they were all about her using the word basement. So Diane wrapped up her experience as follows. I genuinely believe that because Tim calls abuse out regularly, he would see the harm this would cause survivors and that he would do what he could to avoid this at all costs. I am grateful to Megan for sounding the alarm. While I was upset in being removed from the group, and I am disheartened to see that other outspoken members have been removed as well, I see clearly now that the founder of this organization and some of those who monitor the Facebook group have some growth to do. And I do not have the energy to foster. My only consolation is that I have receipts to verify everything I have said above, and I have met some incredible humans throughout this journey. So I thought that was excellent.
Yeah, it was. It's really good. And by the way, your husband commented on the house above the basement, and he said, this house sounds like a Mojo Dojo Casa house.
I love that.
With a giant painting of a horse.
Oh yeah, maybe stay in the basement a while. I don't know. It's not any better up here.
So I want to
leave the house. Just walk out of the house. Yeah. Go somewhere else.
So I looked at the financials on TNE are very, displayed, so you can see them.
Okay.
They took in around $40,000 in 3 months, the last 3 months. So if I'm calculating that right, that's $160,000 a year. that they're taking on from that podcast and Instagram and so on. The giving, if you translate that to a church, it basically translates to a 160 member church, because in churches people give about $1,000 a year. So that's a 160 member church. Our problem is with organizations, whether they're loose or structured, that once something becomes a church, and this is just all my opinion, so take it for what it's worth. Once something becomes an organization, then the needs of the organization comes first before the individuals. And what I want to say, though, is because of religion attracts people that are hurting, but doesn't necessarily have room for their grief. And I think that's what you experienced with this church house, dojo house above the basement. That's what you experience, is what's inevitable in organizations. And I'm not trying to minimize anything, but when you have an organization that's trying to preserve itself, that's the first thing on their mind. How do we preserve ourselves and our spot at the table at the beer camp, however important that is, by the way? I mean, but we're trying to preserve all that. And then who gets ignored, once again, is the people that are hurting and need most to be heard and need most to be felt and understood. And we're given language in our purpose statements that says we care about that, but then we're just moving past it. Is that fair or not?
Yeah. In my last church cover up, which actually was of a convicted child molester pastor. That was the whole technique too. Just silence, make it go away. They had a fixer come in at the end, hired from an outside organization. And he told us in the beginning, now I still hadn't parsed out I had been through it before, but I didn't see the patterns yet. But that he used language that he was here to be a peacemaker. He was here. He said, I'm not an investigator. Which is exactly what I believe TNE ended up saying in their board statement. We're not investigators. We're here I'm here to make peace so we can move forward. But again, and I remember in our church, some of us saying but they're just driving forward, never mind all the dead bodies in the rearview mirror. Yeah. There's just no concern. It's it's done. We can move forward. This has to go away. And I felt very much like that happened here.
Keep the trains moving without hearing the victims or understanding their stories, or taking some time to heal, maybe stopping the trains for a little while to where we could hear them. That's not of concern to an organization. They have to keep the trains moving, keep their, if it's a mutual admiration society like the Theo Bros, we got to keep this thing we got going. That's the most important thing. And unfortunately, it's more important than victims, in my opinion. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
There was a lot of language like that actually in the church that I had left, the abusive church I had left. There was a lot of army language. There was a lot of army motifs used. And there were times where the pastor actually said, we're an army and we don't break rank. So if you don't get in line, you're going to get left behind. We're going to leave you behind. We'll march forward with or without you.
Right.
Which is just mind-boggling to me, because that's so opposite the language that, Jesus in the Bible used, which was leave the 99 and go after the one.
Right. And the Good Samaritan, the story of the Good Samaritan.
Yeah.
Go to that person laying bleeding on the side of the road.
Yeah.
They're the one. Don't pass them by, for all your other things.
Right. It's very bass backwards, as some of my friends would like to say.
True. And I wondered if either of you had thoughts on this. Like, it does seem to me, and I haven't read this anywhere, maybe, I don't know, it's just my thoughts. Seems like organizations tend to just automatically become narcissistic. Like, they can't not be. And I almost don't feel like then the leaders of the organizations get sucked into that. It's not that they have NPD or anything like that, but it overtakes them, the system, this whole culture, this whole conditioning of men to be a certain way, and this is how we handle things. It blows my mind that it follows so exactly. And as you heard so many of these women say, like, this is word for word what I heard in my church.
Yeah.
Like, it's really scary how exact it is every time.
And so you had a bunch more comments that we didn't get to read. There's a bunch of comments out here, including the Dojo House comment.
That was great. Whoever came up with that was brilliant.
I love
kind
that.
of a needed break. Laura showed me that.
Yeah, we gotta laugh so we don't cry.
I will take any excuse I can to talk about the Barbie movie. So
Me too.
I love it too.
Oh, good. I know. I love it when a man loves it. Dom loved it too.
Yeah.
I asked him, like, how'd you really feel about it? Did it hurt at any point? He said it did, but when it did, it was something I needed to look at.
My husband purposely left the lunch until after the movie was over, so we could have sit down and have a wonderful theological and just deep conversation about it over burgers afterwards, because it just
cool. Yeah.
I feel like we've been talking about it for weeks, ever since we saw it. We're like, it had layer upon layer upon layer. I mean, you can go so many places with that movie.
For sure.
Yeah. So I want to thank both of you for coming on and spending your time with us to talk. And I feel like Megan said before, we may need to do another version of this. And I have one or two people that I want to bring in to help us talk about it. But I want to continue this discussion because it's definitely not over, and we didn't get to all the comments or your comments or anything like that. We just kind of scratched the surface. But first, Ruthie, and then Megan, will you give us kind of a closing thought to whoever you want to address out there or whatever you want to say?
Well, I don't know that they're listening right now, but just one thing I wanted to say, just if there are any of the TNE moderators out there listening, I just wanted to try and reiterate and encourage you and plead with you, basically, please just put down your defenses. If you're feeling defensive or whatever, as far as when you're faced with a survivor, please don't be defensive. Let them speak, because the thing is, it's very hard as a survivor to police my tone. And if I'm raw or triggered or in a state of emotion, I can't necessarily stop and go, oh, gee, I wonder, was I raising my voice a little bit when I talked to you there? I'm sorry about that. No, you need, in that moment, you need to be grounded. And so for me, it's just when it comes to survivor stories, or when people come to you with their story, please handle it with grace and with gentleness, because it is so hard to just be put in that position over and over again. Having to relive it over and over again is really, really hard.
Yeah.
And so that would be my thing is, believe women, believe survivors, and try, when you say you're going to be a safe space, you're held to, automatically in my head, you're held to a higher standard. If you're going to claim that you're a safe space, you need to actually be that safe space, and not just if you're going to put yourself in that position. Otherwise, don't claim to be. If you're not prepared to take on that emotional labor of being a safe space for victims, don't claim you are. Just say, sorry, this is not your space to do that. And I will respect that and move on.
It would be much better for someone to say, I don't care.
Yeah.
Than to say I care and then not to listen.
And I've said this before, I can handle your apathy. I can't handle lies. If you're going to be apathetic towards me, fine. I won't waste my time or breath trying to talk to you, but don't lie to me. Don't say you're safe space. Don't say you're going to uphold my story if you're not.
Right.
So that would be my closing statement, I think.
I think that is an excellent
Thank you very much.
closing statement. Excellent. And I don't have a whole lot to add other than to say thank you to Carl, because I feel like you are so unusual in how you responded to this. And you went a step beyond allowing us to talk, and you gave us a platform to talk and to share the voices that had been silenced, and letting me share all of these quotes that I had, you sharing the quotes you had. That's what all of us who have any kind of privilege need to do for the people that are marginalized, that don't have the same privileges we have. We need to use our power and positions, if we have any at all, to amplify their voices and take care of them. And that's a very Jesus thing to do. And I'm personally not even a Jesus follower anymore, I will be honest, but I do very much think he did a bang up job of a lot of things. And I think this is one of them. And I really bothers me when Christians who claim to follow Jesus don't look anything like him. So, and I believe, Carl, you're kind of in a similar space, and I just find it always so interesting that the people who have left the religion tend to reflect more what the religion is about, which is just so crazy to me. But thank you for giving us this space. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. So I would say to the speakers at Theology Beer Camp, to Tim and the new Evangelicals, especially all of those men, I would say this: it's always a risk to have integrity. You always risk giving up some of your shit. You may give up some popularity. People aren't going to be happy that you confronted them. But what really hit me was someone spoke well of me speaking up. And I don't consider myself a hero in this thing or anything, but when they said that, they say, I probably only know about 5 of those type of guys. And I think that's a tragedy.
I would agree with that.
Especially if they're supposedly followers of Christ, that none of them have integrity. And they can probably justify it somehow, and twist it all around in their mind. But just speak up. Take a chance of losing some of your popularity to be authentic. And I think you'll find if you're authentic, then you get the best kind of followers, not the ones that you impress with your machismo or your flannel shirt or your hunting reverend stuff, all of that stuff. The followers, or maybe more accurately, friends you'll gain in the process are authentic and real, and they can be vulnerable with each other and things like that. So that would be my challenge to the speakers, to Tim, and all the people involved. But for the listeners out there, I'd encourage you to look into this and also kind of take evaluation of how you're going to live your life. Are we going to keep continuing this patriarchy of celebrities and mistreatment of abuse victims and continuing to abuse people as we go on down the road? I hope it's not. I hope we're maybe this is a turn. Maybe it's a fork in the road where we're going a different direction. I hope so. But as always, as we always encourage you, be where you are, be who you are, and be at peace.
Thank you for joining us today on the Desert Sanctuary.
Remember, all that wander in the desert are not lost. We hope that you know
You are seen
you are heard
and you are loved.